Before I start this video, I want to make it clear that this isn't a hate video or a Mental Outlaw exposed video, as I still think Mental Outlaw has a lot of good points related to privacy and OPSEC on the dark web, but there's just a couple of mistakes that I feel he made, which could be very dangerous if you decide to implement them. So in this video, I'm going to be covering the mistakes he made and also solutions to counteract them. I also want to mention that my school community is now up and running, and I also have my dark web and OPSEC privacy guide that you can find in the description down below. So to start off, there's a lot of drama surrounding TOR, especially coming from Sam Bent's videos on the topic. If you don't know who Sam Bent is, he's basically someone who has experience as a darknet vendor, so he covers also a lot of OPSEC stuff. He released a couple of videos talking about the inherent security hazards within the Tor browser. So stuff like, needing to restart the Tor browser every time you make an update to the security slider. So you would have safer than safest, and all of those things would actually require you to reboot the Tor browser in order for those changes to have been made without any warning or information sent to the user on the other side. Tor seemed to have just completely ignored that. And you can imagine with like a privacy focused browser, that would be the last thing you want to do is make the UI just janky as hell to operate based around. And furthermore, the default option on Tor should be the safest option, I feel. I don't know why they set it to a lower safety option, and JavaScript should be disabled by default. The problem with JavaScript being enabled by default means that you have more ways to be de-anonymized, because you could imagine JavaScript as almost like an open sandbox for you to run almost any type of code. And, you could use telemetry to track and trace down people through JavaScript pretty easily. But those issues like the Tor security slider and also even the JavaScript isn't too much of a pain to deal with, as you can just go into the settings and tweak them yourself. However, the main problem that we seem to have now is with the Tor user agent strings. If you guys don't know what a user agent string is, it's basically like a HTTP header which basically identifies your browser and your operating system and also the versions of each. Now in normal browsers, your user agent string is actually set to the default. So whatever your operating system is, it will show that operating system. Whatever your browser is, it will show that browser and also the associated versions with it. Inside of the Tor browser, or how it was meant to be before these updates happened, was that you would have a hard-coded user agent that was the same across all devices. So you can imagine, even if you're running Linux on one browser, like as in your true operating system on one browser, and then you have Windows on the other, both of those would show you as running on Windows because the user agent string is hard-coded. And that's what you need across Tor, because if you show your real operating system and your real, browser, that can be used to fingerprint you and track and trace you across websites. So you obviously don't want that. So what has happened in recent versions of Tor is this whole user agent string, the hard-coded version, got removed completely. So it works similar to a regular browser now, in which if you're running on Linux, it shows you the same user agent string that a Linux user would have, instead of everyone having the same user agent string. Now you can also imagine like this is, pretty shocking to say the least, because you can be tracked and traced across websites simply due to your user agent string. So that's, bad news for everyone. And, this has sparked a lot of controversy. People are saying like, oh yeah, Tor might be compromised. Are the feds running Tor? Is, the CIA coming back out of the dead or whatever? And, those accusations and claims may be right, but hopefully not. We'll see how like the next coming years, what happens in those years. But yeah. Now, Mental Outlaw released a video saying that you could counteract this problem by using a browser, a privacy focused browser such as Librewolf, and just route all of the traffic over Tor. It sounds like a good idea on paper, but there's a lot of problems with this. So it says over here, can I use Librewolf with Tor? Please don't. The Tor network is designed to give you complete anonymity, but it can be compromised if you use it with any other browser other than the Tor browser. If you want anonymity, download the Tor browser. So the Tor browser is specifically designed to reduce fingerprintability and to work with Tor. Using Librewolf or any other browser would make you stand out, and it is not recommended. Now, I know Mental Outlaw says to go down the whole route of tweaking your settings to make it look identical to the Tor browser, but in my opinion, there's a lot of room for error when you're tweaking those settings. And also the fact that, Librewolf is a completely different version of the Tor browser, and, like the CSS and the fonts and stuff will all be different. It would actually be easier to just go over and download the Tor source code and then change the settings in there and hard code them. I think that would be easier than trying to hack Librewolf to make it look exactly like Tor. So I'm personally a bit black-pilled on the whole user agent issue because, as you can see here, we've got, you can imagine these two people as two different browsers. So we've got person one with the Linux user agent, and then we got you who modified your user agent to look like a Windows user. So we have, two completely different browsers in play. And once you connect to the Onion website, you can still differentiate these two people because you did, all you did was change your user agent to Windows, and the other person is still running their browser on Linux. So even if let's say you did manage to change your user agent to Windows, your browser can still be fingerprinted because everybody's using different user agents, and therefore you can be tracked and you can be traced. So then how do you fix this issue? Well, there is still some hope, I think. I think that if you were able to randomize the user agent per, every few intervals, like you visit one website, you use one user agent, you visit the other website, you use a different user agent, or maybe even in the same website itself, you change your user agent a couple of times. It would have to depend on what you think is like the traffic on that website, mostly Windows, or is it mostly Linux? And then, adjust your user agent based off of that frequency. Now, I think it's a bit tedious to do this manually. So maybe if someone one day just, made a script for this or something to constantly change the user agent, I think that would be a better approach than to just hard code your user agent to Windows. Even though, yeah, technically Windows is the majority, most people are probably running on Windows when they access the dark web. But just to add, more security, it would be better if it was randomized. Now, this approach obviously wouldn't work in the old version, because if you did randomly change your user agent to Linux, you would easily be identifiable across the multitude of Windows user agents. You would be the only one to stick out. But in this case, where everyone's user agent is different thanks to the updates, it's easier to track you. And that is a big issue. That's why you need to randomize it now. Now, I haven't found any suitable modifier extensions, as in the ones that randomize your user agent. And I probably wouldn't use the ones that are already available either. Someone would have to make a script specifically designed for the Tor browser and its current state to, mess with user agents or whatever. But let's say if you wanted to change it to just the hard-coded string, which is the Windows user agent, that's still better than it running on a Linux user agent, because Windows is most likely going to be the most used browser on Tor still. So there's this user agent extension called modify header value. And yes, before anyone says in the comments like, oh, well, if you use an extension that can be viewed, or like you can be de-anonymized if you add any extensions in there. And in this case, I would say it's unlikely. I've checked some of the source code, but you should check it for yourself. I've checked the source code. I wasn't able to find anything that modified the HTTP or the HTML DOM elements or any of that stuff which could be used to de-anonymize you. So I think if you have JavaScript disabled and like you're using relatively good OPSEC, they shouldn't be able to figure out that you're using an extension. But always just check the source code in case like the code changes by the time I release this video. But yeah, you could just use this one called modify header value, and you could add it to your Firefox as well, or your Tor browser, and that could be solved through that way.